This brother said, we are not Africans. Get that out your tongue, brother. This is the problem that I have with Hebrew Israelites. And I'm watching this restored Hebrew awakening or whatever. It showed up on my description, or not description, recommendations for videos and stuff. And it's not really talking about Hebrew Israelite stuff. It's talking about just different types of ideologies concerning the African elements. Anyways, the problem that I have with Hebrew Israelites and the Hebrew Israelite movement is that they have this disdain, they have this despise for the motherland. They have this disingenuine feeling towards Africa because of what's been instilled in them by white people.
So that's when you go back to race being based off color, because during that time...
And let me pause it right here. I'm going to stop you there. And let's deal with this issue at hand. Because for a man to say that he's not African, when the very culture that he claims came from Africa, we have an issue. You cannot claim to be a Hebrew Israelite in the very culture that you proclaim, the very Bible that you read out of, the very God that you proclaim to pray to and praise came from Africa. How can you, as a black man or a black woman, say that you're not African, but the very Bible that you go by was formulated in Kemet? Can you tell me? Can anybody tell me that? The first Bible was created in Kemet. All the scrolls that were in the Bible came from Kemet. If you go from Genesis to Malachi, you can see some form of relation of the scrolls and the papyrus in Kemet and compare it. And it's almost as interchangeable. It's almost interchangeable with what you see in the scriptures. For an example, the Genesis story, interchangeable with some of the stories, and especially the creation story in Kemet. The 10 plagues, interchangeable with some of the papyrus and the scrolls that you see in Kemet. The book of Psalms, interchangeable with the hymns of Aten. The book of Proverbs, interchangeable with the Proverbs that you see where a Pharaoh is writing letters to his son. But you have the nerves to have this disdain and this hurt for Africa. And then, to make it even worse, you try and accumulate any time that the scriptures talk about Egyptians, you try and correlate that to Africans, as if Egypt is all of Africa, when Egypt is just 5% of Africa. Very disingenuous for you as a black man or a black woman to try and put Egypt or try to represent Egypt as Africa. Egypt is in Africa, but not all of Africa is Egypt. Another thing, Egypt isn't the original name for Africa. That's the Greek name for Africa. The original name for Africa was Afuraka, or in terms of Egypt, the original name for Egypt was Kemet. But when we're talking about land mass, majority of land mass, it was Afuraka. Okay, that's where you get Afurakani. But we'll save that for another day. In conclusion, it would be very, very, very disingenuous and very ignorant for you as a black man or black woman to say that you're not African, but the very scriptures that you go by, the very culture that you abide by, the very Torah that you say that you follow came from Kemet. Very disingenuous. One of the oldest and most ancient concepts of monotheism, of there being a one creator, came from Kemet, and that was atonism. Another ancient monotheistic system that derives from atonism is Ephah. Crazy. It doesn't make any sense to me that a set of people would take upon the perceptions that Europeans gave them and even go so far to believing that Japheth, Shem, and Ham are three different sets of races of people. Because this is the same thing Europeans said. Europeans said that Shem was Asiatic, Japheth was white, and Ham was black. And black means curse. They told you that Ham was cursed. Right? The one that they proclaimed to be black, they claimed that Ham was cursed. You look in their dictionaries, they tell you that Ham are not the Negroes. Why did it say that? It said Ham weren't the Negroes because they tried to take credit and responsibility for the accomplishments of the Egyptians and Ethiopians because they have one of the most ancient civilizations on the continent of Africa. Not to mention all of their religions, most of the way that their system is set up came from Kemet. All of their astrology and their literature and architecture came from Kemet. So now they made you hate your origin. They made you hate the womb that you came out of. You say that you don't proclaim Africa. And while you don't proclaim your own mother, white people are raping her. This is a very explicit thought, but think on this. As you proclaim to be a quote-unquote Israelite, or you proclaim to be an Aborigine, you proclaim to be all these things. And meanwhile, white people are continuing to go within Africa, loot your riches, loot your resources, deceive and brainwash your people, and rape and molest, metaphorically speaking, the very lands that you walked upon, the very lands that your ancestors came from. The scriptures say to honor thy father and thy mother. And another aspect that also means to honor your ancestors. But to look at this from an even bigger aspect is to know that your culture came from Kemet. That doesn't mean that you have to necessarily identify as an Egyptian or a Kemetic person, because we created our own culture. We migrated from northern East Africa and created our own culture, like the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Ashanti, the Iwe, so on and so forth. So no, I'm not telling you that you're technically a Kemetic or an Egyptian. But what I am telling you is that you are to honor thy father and thy mother. What I am telling you is that you as a black man and a black woman, you came from Kemet. Your culture, for that matter, came from Kemet. And so for you to have this disdain for Kemet, to say, F Kemet, we ain't got nothing to do with Kemet. And then for you to take the scripture or the book or the story in Exodus literally, and then have this disdain towards this particular land, you have to look at the background agenda of that. Not to mention, even in the book of Deuteronomy, it tells you not to abhor or hate the Egyptians because you was a stranger in their land. You want to talk trash about Egyptians, that goes against the law. You want to talk trash about the so-called quote-unquote Africans that you proclaim to not be related to, but the scriptures tell you not to do that because you was a stranger in their land. In the book of Isaiah chapter 19 verse 25, it tells you that Egypt are my people and Israel is my inheritance. It tells you in the book of Amos chapter 9 verse 7 that are you not like unto me, O children of Israel, as the Ethiopians are. There's a correlation there. In the book of Hosea, it says that Israel will be called out of Egypt. That the Most High's Son will be called out of Egypt. And I can go even deeper into the whole aspect between who they call Yahweh Shai and the relations that he have with Haru. Because that's basically what the story is. That's why he's called Christ. The word Christ comes from the word Karast. The word Christ comes from the word Karast. But that's beyond me, family.